Now, I'm certainly excited to go on with this part of the morning's breakfast with Steve Mai, our Good Morning Cambridge breakfast. The hashtag today is CAMBCOC. That's CAMBCOC. We encourage you to use it if you're following along online or you're going to post something so that we can follow along the conversation as well. I want to take a moment to introduce our dignitaries that are with us this morning as well. From the city of Cambridge, Her Worship Catherine McGarry. Thank you, Mayor McGarry, for taking time out of your day to come and be with us this morning. Also, Cambridge Region of Waterloo Councillor Helen Jowett. Thank you, Helen, for always supporting our programs. And Cambridge Region of Waterloo Councillor Carl Kiefer as well. Both very supportive of the Chamber work that we do and our programs, and we thank you for that. Also, our breakfast sponsors are Graham, Mathew, and TD, and we can't do this without the strong support of our corporate community. And Graham, Mathew, and TD have always been there for us. Even through the pandemic, they stuck with us. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to John Terrell from TD to bring greetings on behalf of our sponsors.
Thank you, Greg, and good morning, everyone. My name is John Terrell, and I'm the Regional Manager for TD Commercial Banking, covering Cambridge, Kitchener-Waterloo, Guelph, and surrounding communities. We help many local businesses, including several that are on the call this morning, with their borrowing and cash management needs. We'd welcome any opportunity to discuss your banking needs further in the future. On behalf of all of us at TD Commercial Banking, as well as our great partner, Graham Mathew, we're pleased to welcome everyone this morning, and I'm looking forward to the discussion with Steve Mai of a great Cambridge business, Eclipse Automation. So without further ado, I'll pass it back to Greg.
Thanks very much, John. We certainly appreciate you and the Graham Mathew folks for all you do to help the Chamber deliver its programs. I want to acknowledge our community builder sponsors. These are sponsors that are with us all the time, right through the pandemic. Energy Plus Inc. Well, we have to have Energy Plus Inc. Providing us the power that we need every day to do things like this. So thank you very much. HardZap Safety Training and Equipment. No better organization for you to go to if you need safety training or any equipment as well. H4 Logistics. Rena Hawkins is one of our board members, always there to support the Chamber. JD Development Group Corporation. Wonderful developer working here in Cambridge. We certainly appreciate all of their support. And then our friends at Cambridge Memorial Hospital. We can't do without Cambridge Memorial Hospital, and they've been a key and central player, obviously, in the last 20 months, but they've always been there for us and will always be there for us. So thank you for this as well. It's now my pleasure to introduce a good friend of mine, the President and CEO of Eclipse Automation, Steve Mai. He left the shop floor for another automation provider more than 20 years ago with a clear vision to reshape the landscape of automation. His ideology for Eclipse stems from the firm belief that know-how is the driving force and true intellectual property behind his thriving business. Global customers and employees both respond to the promise that know-how, loyalty, and commitment are crucial components to every collaboration with the Eclipse network. Steve has been steadfast in encouraging his team to do things better, continuously innovate, respond to change, and like what you do. These goals have propelled the team at Eclipse Automation to success, designing and building seamless automation systems which shape the future, from medical devices that save lives to alternative energy supports that support environmental initiatives, to consumer products that improves people's daily experience. With headquarters here in Cambridge, Ontario, Canada, the high-growth global footprint of Eclipse facilities now includes Stratford in Canada, Rock Hill, South Carolina, Mesa, Arizona in the US, Munich in Germany, Zurich in Switzerland, Veszprém in Hungary, and Penang in Malaysia. This reach provides bench strength and regional know-how across expert teams for many of the world's leading manufacturers, serving a wide range of industries, including life sciences, transportation, consumer products, nuclear energy, and electronics. Eclipse delivers end-to-end solutions that make their customers' final products extraordinary. Here's an extraordinary entrepreneur from Cambridge. However, coming live from his offices in Munich, Germany, Steve Mai. Welcome this morning, Steve. How are you?
Hi, Greg.
You're looking good for a guy that's, I don't know, how many thousands of kilometers are you away from us?
Quite a few, Greg. I don't know exactly, but far enough.
It's what's the weather like in Munich today?
It's a little overcast, but probably a little warmer than it is in Canada.
Oh yeah,
I think they're about 4 weeks behind us as far as the seasonal temperatures.
Yeah, we're getting, not in Cambridge, but
Yep.
Up in Waterloo, they're getting snow on their cars in the morning, and not interested in that really. Maybe it's time. Maybe you got to spend the winter in Arizona at the plant in Arizona. That might be a good idea.
Yeah, it's pretty nice in Arizona actually at this time of year, but the summers are way too hot.
I know. Steve, you've always been so gracious for me, but also for the chamber, but also for other businesses in the community. Way back when Steve Mai gave me a phone call and said, "Hey, Greg, we'd like you to come over and see our operation and, and get to know us a little bit." And I walked in that industrial plaza, new business.
It was a garage.
It was a garage. New business operation starting up. You and a couple others in there. In fact, I walked into I tell everybody this story. I walk into the office. There's nobody in the office. All of a sudden, the shop door opens and Steve comes in with his shop coat on. And hey, Greg, how you doing? Come on into the shop. Back then, did you really envision the incredible company you were going to end up with? 20 plus years later.
The short answer for that's no. We started out with a pretty basic vision back then. We wanted to build turnkey machines self-sufficiently in-house. And the key to that was to basically take a higher level of expertise, foundational expertise, with a vertically integrated model and grow it from there so that we would retain control over our business and kind of purposely affect speed to market. So that was the general vision. It was to give customers probably more focus and more flexibility, and to see where it kind of went from there.
In the grand scheme of building a company, when you talk about, I say this all the time, every company starts small, right? Doesn't matter what business it is. It always starts with, 2 or 3 or, a group of friends getting together or like-minded individuals, and they all start small. The rapid pace of growth is especially in some companies. You take the tech world, it's pretty easy, right? Because all of a sudden your technology, it's all software, you're not manufacturing a product. But the speed of growth of Eclipse Automation, you actually building stuff, must be surprising in your industry. Like, your industry's got to look at Eclipse and say, wow, how did these guys do this in such a short period of time?
I can't speak for them. I can speak for myself. At the end of the day, I think it stems from understanding what your business is. I think and that would be advice I'd give anybody in business. I mean, our business is to cater to the top companies in the world, the top innovators in the world. They don't do things slow, mediocre, or without intention. Okay. Mm-hmm. So we learned very quickly, once we were onto something, that, if we don't stay at that trajectory, there's no other reason for them to keep coming back to us, because we won't be able to support them long term. Yeah. So foundationally, I would say that it's a big part of the driving growth that we've had, and one doesn't go without the other. There's no compromise. You would lose the ability to capitalize on the vast opportunities that there are worldwide.
Yeah. What a lot of people don't know, and I was kind of taken back, I guess, a bit when you and I had a conversation, I think in March of 2020, when you phoned me up and said, "Hey, Greg, we're gonna, we got a problem. We're gonna identify that we've identified this problem. We can't get PPE in Canada. Healthcare workers are using, old stuff. We need to have domestic. I think even the premier at that point said, we got to fix this. The prime minister said we got to fix this. But what was interesting to me was to find out that Eclipse Automation has a very long history and track record in working for the healthcare industries. How did that get started, or was that a niche right from the start?
I'd say it was a niche right from the start, from the perspective that me and the individuals at Eclipse, we had experience in the industry, prior to opening Eclipse. We had contacts, we know the market. It all starts when you're dealing with medical. You have to know the regulatory compliance part of the industry to be able to get into it. After you've accomplished that, it's just automation. And I say that because that's what we do for a living, design, build, automation. So the key to being able to penetrate that market is to be able to do it while under the regulatory and compliance, and support your customers to be able, so that they can efficiently get their products to market.
Yeah. And March the 17th, 2020, the premier stands at the podium and sends everybody home. I guess everybody kind of looked at one another and said, what the heck are you talking about? Yes, go home. PPE was, as I mentioned, and we talked about your involvement in healthcare, PPE was, the number one concern, I think, on everybody's mind at the time. We hadn't even talked about, for the general public or for businesses, we were talking about healthcare workers, frontline workers needing PPE. On March the 25th, we had a conversation of 2020 that, you were going to design and build an N95 line mask. How does a large organization like Eclipse pivot so quickly and adapt to this change?
Foundationally, that's what Eclipse is. That's like I started out by saying, the foundation of our company, the thought process of the company when we started was around this level of flexibility, control, vertical engine integration. And when you think about that, it means we also have full control over our supply chain in general terms. Means we employ machinists, fabricators, engineers, everybody that we need to, as far as our ecosystem, to control the product, to get it to market with certainty, faster than anybody else. That's generally who Eclipse is. So then you take that, and you have me watching TV like everybody else, and them telling us about this magical unicorn N95 mask that all of a sudden nobody paid attention to prior to the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And then, standing there and saying that we as Canadians have no availability to it or ability to get where we need to go with this. And, after the, quite frankly, pure shock, and I would say humility in it, because, when you look at it for what it is, sure, there was no desire in this country to manufacture an N95 machine or know-how to be able to do that, because the status quo was to bring offshore product in for the cheapest way possible, and quite frankly, looked like nobody cared before. So, we looked at it from the perspective that first of all, we could build the machine. The question was more around what is the compliance, and I was more shocked about the compliance piece of it than I was around the supply chain part of it. The fact that we forfeited our compliance in this country to another country without any questions asked, have no way to certify an N95 mask, allow the unions to specify that that's the only way and path forward for healthcare workers, and still don't have compliance in this country because we reverted back to offshore product, quite frankly, is appalling from my perspective, when the core of our business and the core of what we do is to facilitate other companies, mostly outside of Canada, to get to market as fast as possible and reach compliance within the medical industry.
You know, and this is the important part about it. This is what you and I have talked about quite a bit on either our radio show or even verbally about this whole problem. And I can remember you kind of walking me through the process of saying, you know, and I almost couldn't believe what you were saying. You know, Canada doesn't have any standards for this mask. We defer all of the standards to another country. So another country is
still do.
And still do. And then so another country has established standards on what an N95 mask needs to do and how it needs to perform and how it needs to work, and then tells Canada what they have to accept. So really, Health Canada is sitting there saying this, as soon as this other country approves it, then it's good for our use.
Basically, but I mean, then it goes to, you know, when you're talking about medical grade N95s, I mean, then it also goes to what can be used, and this is based on the standards within OSHA, right? Within, you know, the Occupational Health and Safety Act. And, you know, the bureaucracy within these, you know, the communication between whether, you know, you have a standard product that's standardized or can be used, those are still major roadblocks. So although, you know, Health Canada, you know, did make a valid effort to try to put a certification around, an interim certification around the product, they had no way to lift the barriers that were created through use of the product.
Yeah.
And, you know, at the same token, you know, CSA, and there's other groups that we're members of now, like CAPM, which is an organization really that's driving an agenda around, you know, what PPE should be used in this country and the standards within it, are working within CSA to try to lift these barriers. But, you know, I just wonder what the motivation is at this point. I mean, all the contracts that I'm aware of, and most of them have been tied up for more than 3 to 5 years with offshore product. So there's a major barrier of entry within Canada to get there. And there still isn't, even if there is a CSA standard that for a medical respirator, the question still, it has to be asked, what's the motivation for the Occupational Health and Safety Act to lift the barriers that are currently in place for healthcare workers if the economics aren't proportionate?
Yeah.
And then, you know, my final question is, you know, I just find it very, very bizarre that a vaccine can be approved for use in a country faster than a mask. I know. You got to think about that point for just 2 seconds and ask yourself what's going on.
Yeah. And you know, I think every single political leader in this country, every premier, the prime minister, stood early on in the pandemic and said, we are not going to be held at bay by a foreign country anymore when it comes to PPE. We're going to manufacture PPE. We're going to stand up companies right here. We're going to make sure that it's available for our healthcare workers. And then September 2020 comes along. This is not very far into it, and all of the contracts get renewed for PPE suppliers that are offshore based. And after all of the political leadership had stood up and said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to stand up local companies and do that. Well, is there a disconnect between what the politician says and how the bureaucracy can act? Because I think you even said to me, you know, the politicians are almost out of the way. It's very difficult to be able to blend that together and make these changes because they're almost too significant to overcome.
Absolutely. But I mean, when you say almost out of the way, I think that's the problem. They need to get all the way out of the way. Like at the end of the day, I mean, you're either in or you're out when you're dealing with something like this, right? And, you know, I think the barrier is, you know, I want to take a step back from this for a second, as far as, you know, when I looked at this and when I looked at the trajectory that was going from March to September, it had positive signs of change in this country. Okay. And I want to talk about that more from a manufacturing perspective than, COVID or masks or from that perspective, meaning that, people were looking to innovate. There was support to innovate within this country, create IP within this country, make a better product that would be controlled within this country, and then really have innovation that could be reoccurring revenue for the country as a whole. Okay, and we were following that trajectory, right? And at least that was the message, and it looked like the barriers that manufacturers have faced and business has faced in this country for many, many, many years of red tape were being removed. And they were, because there was a motivation to remove some of them for the pandemic. But you're right, by the time August, September came around, it went off like a switch. Everybody was risk adverse. There was all the work that could have, or foundational work that could have or would have been done to improve a path forward to actually come out of the pandemic faster, better, and cheaper was walked away from and destroyed, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And from a perspective that for us to succeed as Canadians moving forward, we really do need innovation, and the government talks about innovation all the time. But I can tell you, just from my perspective, they don't understand what it is.
Yeah.
So
it's a fascinating story for individuals that are listening in here that maybe don't really get it. But what you need to understand is in the region of Waterloo, just for the sake of our audience, we had virtually no producers of PPE at all. It didn't seem needy. It was really difficult to compete with all of the offshore stuff at that point. But post-pandemic, and I'm not just talking about masks, I'm talking about all kinds of PPE. We have about 93 companies now manufacturing various forms of PPE in the region of Waterloo alone. It's astounding. And that goes right to hand sanitizer and all kinds of stuff. But to find out, once you make that, and I guess in your perspective, a very expensive transition and pivot early on in the game to try and meet what you perceive to be the messaging from the political leadership, and then to find out that no, it just gets stalled. It's almost an impossible game. It has got to be not only frustrating for Eclipse Automation, but for hundreds of other companies across Canada who tried to help and wanted to be able to move forward with a business plan to be able to provide PPE for medical professionals and the communities across the country.
Yeah, definitely frustrating. But what I would say is, I want to just bring up one point to that. Correct. We were going to help with equipment, and that was our original kind of motive in this, because we were able. That's what was our primary business, and it's something we believe we could do quickly. The reason we got into the N95 business is because we realized that nobody in Canada, or very few, less than one or two others, would be willing to or want to or could actually go into N95. And the reason is because even if you were successful in designing a product, making a machine, opening a manufacturing facility, you couldn't get it certified because there was nobody to help you. So we took it on, the decision I made to take it on was around more the embarrassment that we would, no matter what happened after this, we would be in the same boat we are today if nobody drove an agenda to create a Canadian certification. And from my perspective, that is the most important outcome to this. Mm-hmm. So we are working towards that transition. We have many other leaders that did PPE of some sort. Some are doing some forms of an N95 or disposable respirator and different certifications with that. But factually, if you miss the opportunity to regain the control that you need through certification, you would never have a chance to actually recover from it the next time this happens.
Yeah.
So I want to be very clear that from my perspective, this is part of my core business. It isn't a secondary business, generally machinery, all of this other thing. So my risks in this were, yes, it was a costly proposition, but I mean, we needed to do something as well during the pandemic. We set out to help. We wanted to make a better respirator. We wanted to understand what that means. And it means one that protects you equally as well as what's on the market, but you can breathe better in. Because respirators today, they're not made to be worn as long as they had to be for the pandemic. Okay, so the government went and the supply chain went back to buying respirators that were used for a purpose pre-pandemic. They're not actually equipped to use them for the length of time and the durations that they were being used for. So, for me, the way we went forward with this, the way the government went forward with this, the way the regulators went forward to this, what they basically did was kill the possibility of innovation in this country to basically have a respirator that you could gain control of to make it better, because there's no longer an economic business case for it because of what they did.
Yeah. So, you take pre-pandemic, respirators were probably, they, like you said, they were used for a purpose. So, you're a doctor or a nurse is going into an area where there's a contagion. They wear the N95 mask. They go in there and deal with the patient. They come out and they take off the N95 mask.
And
disposable. Now they were wearing them for 12 consecutive hours, only taking them off to eat, and that's about it. And they weren't ever designed for that. And I want to get into that because we had a great discussion about that from an efficacy perspective, especially the masks that we're handing out now that you're of your 1.5 million donation. They're so thin and so light, people would look at them and say, what are you talking about? And I'm saying, well, it's, the efficacy of this is like 10 times what the cloth mask is that you're wearing. People were wearing, 2-layer cloth masks and thinking they were getting substantial protection when in fact, we found out that they weren't getting protection. So what's the difference in, why is it so easy to breathe through your masks and yet they give so much greater protection? What is that complex production process? I know you haven't got much time to talk about it, but we talked about the weave, right?
It is the weave. I mean, long story short is it carries a static charge. That's what gives it the filtration properties. So, I mean, provided the weave of the material, the melt blown is correct, which you can achieve in many, many ways. You can achieve the filtration levels that are required to protect you from COVID. On the other side of the efficacy part of it is how breathable is it while protecting you. And, that's the bigger part of this, right? Is if you're going to wear a product for that long and you're going to, require to be breathing in it, the more air you can get through it is very, very, very important. And so when you look at the product that and this is a surgical mask that we donated, they're using the same weave as our N95s, just made up of a different recipe. And, that's what we were working towards. I mean, it's no secret we had NGen money to make, and that was in a grant to develop a machine and a process that quote unquote made a better mask for Canadians. And once we made a better mask, we were told, no, we just want to buy a cheaper mask. And, at the end of the day, that's where
you get a cheaper mask.
That's what you get, right? And so, unfortunately, that's where we've gotten back to. And they're just not made for that purpose. That's all.
I found it really interesting in one conversation that we had. You said that, when you talk about the weave, how tight is things, you actually said, through the process of an N95 mask that, the holes in the weave could be as big around as your finger. which I thought, well, that's, because people are always talking about these microns of viruses coming in, but it's the way the layers are laid on top of one another that and bounces the virus around inside and it gets collected. That's
Yeah,
really
like it's
the secret, right? Yeah,
yeah, it's thousands of micro overlaps that allow it to be bounced around and eventually will stick to one of them. Like I said, I think I explained it to you as putting 1,000 strainers into each other and turning them a quarter of a turn each and pouring water through them. It's impossible for the water not to touch an edge as it's straining.
Yeah.
And that's basically the premise behind it.
It's such a phenomenal, it's really interesting. I get to have those fun conversations with people educating me all the time, so I appreciate it. And Steve always takes time to do that with me. I don't know why, but he always does. So you're live from your new offices in Germany right now, as we said. You're, a homegrown Cambridge business. Seems Eclipse is taking over the automation world. What's next, Steve?
Well, I mean, our model was first to start in Canada, then North America. So our footprint, as you said, in the introduction is in Canada is Cambridge. Then we have Mesa, Arizona, and Rock Hill, South Carolina. We're now basically duplicating that model in Europe. So we have Switzerland, our Swiss location just outside of Zurich. We have our Munich, Germany location, and we have our Veszprém, Hungary location. So again, it's kind of this triangle approach to a territorial approach to business. But our international customers really have always been pushing us to have an approach that allows us to really cover the 3 continents. So North America, Europe, and Asia. So our next move, we're moving into, we've opened business in Malaysia, in Penang, and for next year we'll be building a facility there and operating in Penang. So that's really the next big thing for us. The Eclipse Innovations Group, the one that does the masks, it's starting to get a lot of traction in other high value contract manufacturing. So we're expanding that business as well, where we can facilitate our expertise in automation and technology with customers that are really early stage in their product development life cycle. So it really lets us support that, and that's where we're concentrating our efforts these days.
It's just so exciting. It's so exciting to hear about a Cambridge homegrown business. This little seedling gets born 20 plus years ago and is now impacting the entire world. And it's such a revealing story of entrepreneurship, dedication, commitment, and innovation. And I think that's what people need to understand. Innovation isn't just in Waterloo. Innovation is right here in Cambridge, alive and well. And and I also, before I leave that part, I want to say, Steve, none of us have given up on getting the regulatory environment changed at Health Canada so that we can get Canadian PPE manufactured. We're still on that path to getting that corrected, correct?
Yeah. I mean, there's a path for it. Like I said, there's a group called CAPM. You can, and it's basically all the substantial companies got together and formed this group so that we could, we could assist in the regulatory improvements as we're, putting our own standards in place for Canadians. The disappointment is that, there's no motivation or push behind the group from, governmental or any point of view to get it done in an expedient way. So I believe the target is like March or April of 2022, best case scenario. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's a year after it was needed. Yeah. But it looks like it's going to happen. And I mean, I would say that's where our commitment really lied. And it's lied there from the beginning. Because it makes, like, we couldn't sell a machine because there wasn't any regulatory body to certify a mask after you sold it. Yeah. So if you think about that, how would you ever how would you ever fix the problem? So, we are committed to fixing that problem, and so are a lot of the leaders within the community that stepped up during the pandemic. So the answer is simply yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're right there with you. The Best Waterloo team with Tony Lamantia from Waterloo Act Dev, Communitech, of course, and the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber. We're fighting the same battles. We have some keen connections with Health Canada, but it's not necessarily them. It's the political environment, making sure that they're directing effectively the bureaucratic environment and coming up with those really important things to make sure we don't get hung up on this again. Steve, my last question, I wanted to make sure I gave you some time for this, but you've got I know the last time we talked, you were at 900 employees, but you're probably well over 1,000 employees now worldwide, and growing as we hear with the opening. But it started right here, and as you would say, a little garage. How important is your home community to you? A lot of your, early day employees are still there at Eclipse working with you and developing programs. And you worked, I know, very closely with hospital staff here when you were developing and designing that N95 mask machine. How important is your community in spite of the fact that you're now a super large global entity?
I mean, Greg, very, very important. I mean, I was born and raised in Cambridge. What I would say is, foundationally, not just the community, but my staff. The greater Kitchener-Waterloo and Cambridge area. The foundational elements of what they allow a company like myself to build is immense because of the education system, the ability to get apprentices, the programs, the support network around the community. It's a massive part of being able to build a company like mine. And when you talk about the three pillars that kind of was the foundation of our company when we started 20 years ago, and they're still the foundation now, being know-how, loyalty, and commitment. It's all about people. It starts with people, it ends with people. And the biggest part of this is the fact that we have the support of the community, we have the support of the people, and for us it's important to give that back as well, right? And in essence, we don't just do that in Cambridge, right? We do that in any community we go into, but the foundation of it for me personally is, that's where it started.
Yeah, it's been just wonderful to know you over the last 20 years. And as I said in the beginning, you're, in spite of you being extremely busy most of your days, trying to squeeze in a little bit of that family time as well. But you've always been incredibly responsive to me. And I just can't explain how appreciative I am of that, Steve. But your entire team at Eclipse too are so proud of what they do and how they do it. I think I sent you an email when we had the masks delivered, the first delivery of the masks, and the truck driver that came was, and shipper, he was a phenomenal individual, just such a friendly. We had to make sure actually he was in the pictures when we took the pictures out front, because he was so impressive, because he was just darn proud to be part of the Eclipse team. And, I want everybody to know what a phenomenal organization you've built. And we all know that phenomenal organizations come from true leadership spirit. And I can tell you, I don't know any other CEO, entrepreneur from a large corporation like Eclipse that is so humble and so part of the community and committed to the community as you are, Steve. And I just want to thank you for everything you and your team do. I want to thank you for being part of the Chamber of Commerce for many years and being my friend. And I can't wait to see where Eclipse is going to go from here.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that.
Just awesome. Well, folks, thanks for joining us today. We've had a fantastic day with with my friend Steve Mai. We've had our incredible results of our AGM. The chamber had a great year, and we're certainly appreciating all of the efforts that you do to keep us going and keep us inspired again. Our next Good Morning Breakfast is going to be a conversation with our own Catherine McGarry, the mayor of the city of Cambridge, and the city of St. Catharines mayor, Walter Sesnick, on December 9th at 9:30 in the morning. Get on to cambridgechamber.com and register right now. And don't forget Chamber Chat every Wednesday morning, 9 to 10. The discussion is different each week. Sometimes I don't even know what the discussion is going to be, but we'll be there every Wednesday morning, 9 to 10 a.m. Thanks very much, folks, and have a great day.